Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? Welcome to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. And for the first time in a long time, the Indianapolis Colts are actually doing things in free agency, making some moves, bringing in some new players. It's great. It's fun. It's exciting. We will open with that. But first, thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether it's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. If you want to watch over there, you can comment, join the conversation on everything we're talking about over here on the Real Jonathan Smith Show. Maybe you're watching on Twitter, or maybe you're listening via that Indy Sports Ticket app. No matter how you're listening, I greatly, greatly appreciate it. Now, the Indianapolis Colts are active in free agency, and it's fun. DeForest Buckner tweeting out, that boy's cooking, hashtag Chef Ballard. It's great. It's fun. It's exciting. I am glad that the Colts are partaking in free agency this year. It's a nice little change of pace. Before I compliment the Colts, though, I would like to complain. I'm sorry, but I have to. Why didn't this happen last year? It's a shame and incredibly annoying that it took Drew Lock throwing for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns for Chris Ballard to finally be like, you know what? We probably need a different safety, and we probably need some better cornerbacks. We couldn't guard that rookie out of LSU. It's kind of problematic. We should probably address the secondary. It's a shame that that had to happen for these changes to finally take place. And you hear people say, or I do at least, you hear people say that it's important to be proactive and not reactive, right? Because if you're proactive, you see problems before they arise, you can get out in front of them and you can fix them before they happen. But if you're reactive, then something bad happens, and then you patch it up as quickly as you can, and then from that point forward, you're always behind the 8 ball, just reacting to everything that happens to you. And that is not a fun place to be. That's how you get beaten up really quickly. And the Colts, for the past several years, have been a reactive franchise. They have not been proactive. They haven't gotten out in front of their problems. You know who has done that? Philadelphia Eagles. That's why they just won the Super Bowl. You know who else has done that? The Kansas City Chiefs. It's part of why they've played in 7 straight AFC championship games. You have to be proactive. You have to see the problems before they arise. And Chris Ballard just hasn't done a very good job of doing that. Okay? You can go back to the Andrew Luck years. They could have drafted a young quarterback to develop behind Andrew Luck. They didn't do that. And from that moment forward, they've been behind the 8 ball, right? They were behind the 8 ball with the quarterback position for those next 3 years. They started 7 different quarterbacks in that 3-year stretch. They didn't draft a quarterback until they absolutely had to. When they're like, you know what? I don't think we can put Band-Aids on this anymore. Okay, they were reactive to their quarterback issues. And we're seeing the exact same thing with the secondary. And we're going to see it with the tight end position this year as well. Their second-round pick, probably going to go to a tight end. Okay, the Colts had the 26th ranked pass defense in the NFL this year. And everyone who knew anything about this roster, anyone who just glanced at it and was like, Jalen Jones and Samuel Womack are going to be your top 2 corners, could have looked at it and been like, you know what, this secondary probably going to struggle. And that's not including the fact that Nick Cross hadn't been very good until this year. And Julian Blackmon was on a 1-year deal, which tells you all you need to know about what the Colts thought about Julian Blackmon. The fact that they let him test the market and no one else offered him a contract. Yet last year, Chris Ballard and all of his genius didn't do anything about it. It took a year of awful play for him to do anything. This is a reactive move, not proactive. And I know that Gus Bradley's sitting at home, seeing all these changes, and he's just pissed. because, Charvarius Ward and Cam Bynum would have made this Colts defense better last year. I'm sure that Gus Bradley would have put a better product on the field if he hadn't been, spending part of his offseason trying to convert a linebacker to safety and trying to get a 7th-round pick to learn how to play corner for him and trying to get a guy that they had to pick up off of waivers to play corner for him. I'm sure his defense would have been better if the Colts hadn't have had to do all of that. Okay, this is a reactive move, and reactive franchises do not win. And the reactive moves aren't done. They're going to take a tight end this year in the NFL draft. Okay, it's only taken them 5 years of bad to mediocre tight end play for Chris Ballard to finally be like, you know what? We need a new tight end. Tight end by committee is not the way to do things. Okay, so that's what this franchise is right now. They're just incredibly reactive, and it's frustrating because I would like for them to be a little bit more proactive in plugging these holes before they arise. Now, to Chris Ballard's credit, at least he's plugging the holes. Cam Bynum is a Colt, 4 years, $60 million, right? A new safety is in town, no more Julian Blackmon. Charvarius Ward, he's a Colt, 3-year, $60 million deal for him. We're going to start with Cam Bynum, though, because the Colts signed him first. So Cam Bynum, 4 years, $60 million. I like this signing for a couple of different reasons. Okay. Most obvious one, Colts needed a safety. And Julian Blackmon, for another year, just no good. So I'm glad the Colts decided to move in a different direction. I'm glad the Colts decided not to sign their own. In this case, we'll get to, the Will Fries thing here later. Okay, so I'm glad that the Colts decided to release Julian Blackmon, not bring him back, and roll with Cam Bynum instead. The guy's only 26, which is another thing that I like about this signing. He's still young, so this 4-year deal, it'll expire when Cam Bynum's 30. That's fine. You can play safety in the NFL at the age of 30. Okay? He's already played in the NFL for 4 years, and here's my absolute favorite thing about him. Maybe. I don't know. There's actually a lot that I like about this guy. He's only missed 3 games in 4 years. His rookie year, he played 14 games. And then in the last 3 years, he started every game that the Vikings have played. That's impressive to me. He hasn't missed a start. This guy is durable. You can trust him. He's going to be on the field. Okay, this isn't an investment in someone who's got a lengthy injury history or only plays 9 or 10 games a year. No. Cam Bynum is going to be on the field for the Colts consistently. That is what his track record says. Another important thing about him, based on what I know about Lou Anarumo's defense and what people have told me, is that this Cam Bynum dude is very versatile. He's not just a safety. He played cornerback in college. That means he can cover man to man. And when you look around the NFL, there are some safeties that just kind of feel like an extra linebacker. You remember when Jamal Adams was playing for Seattle and he was always down by the line of scrimmage and they blitzed him a lot and he was really good in the run game, but if you asked him to defend the opposition's tight end, he struggled a little bit. That's not Cam Bynum. This guy can legitimately cover, and he can also play safety, but he can also come up and fill the run, and he can also blitz. You can't play safety you can't play on Brian Flores' defense, period, if you don't have the ability to blitz and stop the run. You don't log 233 tackles in a 2-year span if you can't fill the run like Cam Bynum has done these last 2 years. And once again, the coverage skills are there. Cam Bynum is a versatile player who can do a lot for, Lou Anarumo and this Colts defense. He has 19 passes defended these last 2 years. Those are pretty solid numbers for a safety. And he has 5 interceptions in the last 2 years. Okay, Cam Bynum can cover. He can fill the run. He fills a position of need for the Colts. He's only 26, so he's going to be around for a few years. He doesn't miss games, hasn't missed a start in the last 3 years. he's better than Julian Blackmon. Now, that's not saying much, but I'll take the upgrades where I can get them, especially at a position that people that are way smarter than me when it comes to X's and O's of football tell me is so important for Lou Anarumo's defense. You know what else I really like about this? This guy's a good player. You know, like you look at him and he's not, he's good enough. Okay, because if he was good enough, he would not have gotten a 4-year deal. Wouldn't have happened. You know, it'd have been like a 1 or a 2-year deal, and and then we'll kind of have to wait and see from there. No. The Colts gave him a 4-year deal, which means that they think that this dude is a legitimate player who's going to have a pretty big impact on this team. And I hope they're right. And I think that they will be. I like this Cam Bynum signing. Good job, Chris Ballard. The other addition to the Indianapolis Colts and this secondary, Charvarius Ward. Okay, 3 years, $60 million deal. I think he had like a $20 million signing bonus, which is cool. Good for him. And I just know that Lou Anarumo is overjoyed with what happened yesterday. Because, when he was in Cincinnati, the Bengals kept getting rid of all of his good players. And as of yesterday, the Colts not only added a safety that seems like he can really play and is going to add to this Lou Anarumo defense, but they also added Charvarius Ward, who's a little older. He's 28, but he's had a lot of success with the 49ers. He proved during his time in San Francisco that he can be the best cornerback on a leading defense in the NFL. When was the last time the Colts could say that about one of their cornerbacks? It's been a while. I don't remember the last time the Colts had a cornerback where I'm like, you know what? If you throw it his way, I'm pretty confident that the pass won't be completed. You can say that about Charvarius Ward. Now, he didn't have a great year last year. Okay, he only played 12 games, but part of that could have just been because 2 years ago he was outstanding. He had 23 passes defended and five interceptions two years ago. He ended up being second team All-Pro that year. It was by far the best year of his career. Okay, he was the best cornerback on a team that played in the Super Bowl. This is a legitimately good player. And you're probably like, Jonathan, what does 2 years ago have to do with last year? Well, when you're a corner and you show that you're incredibly capable, teams just don't throw your way as much. And so your number of interceptions tends to go down a little bit, and your number of passes defended tend to go down. I think when you pair that with the fact that he missed 4 games last year, I think that's part of why we saw the decrease in his numbers. Okay? And Chris Ballard, I just, tip of the hat to him. He didn't lie to us. He said he was going to actually use free agency this year. He's done that. And it looks like the Colts are going to be better for it. It is amazing what you can do in free agency when you're willing to actually spend the money. Proven commodities are expensive, but you know what you're buying. That's why they're a little more expensive. Okay, for the Colts yesterday, they brought in a legitimate starting caliber safety and a legitimate starting caliber cornerback. If the Colts had drafted those positions, then sure, they would have felt good about them. The Colts wouldn't be drafting guys if they didn't think that they were going to stick around in the NFL. But they wouldn't have known for certain what was going to happen. Okay, because no one ever knows for certain what's going to happen with the guys that get drafted in the NFL. Honestly, you don't know what's going to happen with the guys that you sign in free agency. But you can be more sure about the guys that you pick up in free agency than you can of the guys that you draft. Another plus sign of signing these guys is depth. Depth becomes a thing, especially at corner for the Colts. Signing Charvarius Ward is huge because that cornerback 2 spot becomes less worrisome. They have legitimate depth at the position. Ward is obviously going to be, the first corner. I don't know if Lou Anarumo likes to have his best corner follow the opposing team's best wide receiver, but if that's what Lou Anarumo wants to do, Charvarius Ward will be the guy who does that. But Juju Brents, Jalen Jones, and Samuel Womack, obviously one of those other 3 guys one of those three guys is going to be the second corner on the field. But whoever the two backups wind up being, like, I feel pretty decent about. Like, Samuel Womack, not a great player, but like if he's your third or fourth corner, that's good. If Jalen Jones is your second or third corner, that's good. If he's your first corner like he was last year, that's not good. But if he's your second or third, like, that's cool. Juju Brent, same thing. We haven't seen very much from him because he just can't stay healthy. So that depth is good. It's important. This Colts defense got better yesterday. Once again, it's amazing what happens when you actually spend money in free agency. This Colts defense, I don't know about you, but I feel so much better about it. Now, some things still need to happen. They probably need another pass rusher because Dio Dangbo left just for I always got to wait for those last three beeps. Sorry about that. If you're watching on YouTube, I don't know if you could hear that or not, but we had a tornado test message thing. Anyway, when you spend money in free agency, it does come at a slight cost. And I'm going to tell you what that is when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
may, one day, be a must-listen for sports enthusiasts.
Yeah, and monkeys might fly out of my butt.
Uh-oh. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Yeah. Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you've had a nice week so far. It's only Tuesday. I feel like it's so much later in the week just because so much news has broke. Chris Ballard's done more in these, last 36 hours than he has, in his previous, 8 years in free agency. And while there's good stuff that comes with this, revamping that secondary, paying, Charvarius Ward and paying Cam Bynum means that you can't pay other guys. And the Colts have lost Will Fries because of that. And he's going to the Vikings. They're paying him a lot of money, 5 years, $88 million coming off of an injury. I don't blame the Colts for not wanting him to pay that much. I don't know really where their cap situation is at as of right now. But if you also want to bring in a quarterback to compete with Anthony Richardson, then you probably can't afford to pay Will Fries that much. It was reported this morning from Stephen Holder, of all people, that Daniel Jones is down to a decision between two teams, the Indianapolis Colts and the Minnesota Vikings. So hopefully Daniel Jones re-signs with the Vikings. Adam Schefter reported really before free agency even started that Daniel Jones was probably going to stay in Minnesota. Okay, so Colts, they lose Will Fries. Colts still looking to add a quarterback. We're about to touch on both of those things. I do want to say really quickly, though, the Colts not being able to retain Will Fries probably means that with the 14th pick, the Colts are going to take Tyler Booker from Alabama. Okay, offensive guard. People are not going to like that, but they need an offensive guard. Like they legitimately need one. Tyler Warren probably won't be on the board at 14. Okay, if he is, then the Colts will have a pretty big choice to make, but there's going to be good tight ends available in the second and third round of this year's NFL draft. So because they weren't able to bring back Will Fries, I do think Tyler Booker, an offensive guard from the University of Alabama, will be the Colts' first round pick this season. And I'm not going to complain about it because to me, that makes a lot of sense. Now, moving on to the quarterback situation here in the great city of Indianapolis. Sam Darnold and Justin Fields are off the board. There's still a question for the Colts at quarterback. Some of the better options, like Sam Darnold and Justin Fields, aren't available anymore to compete with Anthony Richardson. Aaron Rodgers looks like he's going to wind up in Pittsburgh. Daniel Jones is looking at re-signing with, the Vikings, apparently. Apparently, he's also weighing his decision to potentially come to the Colts. Once again, reported by Stephen Holder this morning. Jimmy Garoppolo, who wouldn't have been a bad option, he re-signed to stay in L.A. to continue to be the backup to Matthew Stafford. So there were, several players that are off the board. There are guys who appear to be off the board. Rodgers, Daniel Jones is, bouncing back and forth. I personally think he's going to stay in Minnesota just to continue with the, his Kevin O'Connell rehab process. Okay, just to sit in it and just be like, you know what? I know if I hang out with Kevin O'Connell for one more year, everyone's view of me will change pretty dramatically because Kevin O'Connell is one of the best offensive coaches in the NFL. Okay, so that is what I expect for Daniel Jones. We'll see, though. Once again, he's apparently down to a decision between the Colts and the Vikings. So Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston seem like the two best quarterbacks left. If Daniel Jones decides to re-sign with the Vikings, we should hopefully find out what he's going to do today. And I now have to ask the question, if, obviously, because we already know the answer for Daniel Jones, if he comes here, he is not a starting caliber quarterback. But if he doesn't come here, then what do the Colts do? Because they promised us an open quarterback competition. And Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston, like if those are the two best quarterbacks left, like are either one of those two guys really competition? Russell Wilson feels like a guy who would expect to be handed a starting job, but at the same time, my prediction still on the board of Russell Wilson's going to look around at the end of this. I don't even think he has an offer from anybody. And the Colts are going to be sitting there like, oh gosh, we don't have anyone to compete with Anthony Richardson yet. So I guess we got to bring in Russell Wilson. That's kind of what I'm expecting to happen. Gardner Minshew, someone just threw his name out in the YouTube chat. Like that is also definitely an option for the Colts. I would like him here more than Russell Wilson and or Jameis Winston. Okay, because, Jameis Winston doesn't feel like real competition. He's had 10 seasons in the NFL to figure it out, and he hasn't. He's been a backup for like the past 7 years. Like he doesn't feel like real competition. So with where this is headed, based off of who's signed already and who the Colts could potentially sign, it doesn't seem like the Colts are going to have a like real legitimate quarterback competition, even if they bring in Gardner Minshew. They're going to opt for Anthony Richardson. Of all the guys that are left, except for maybe Russell Wilson, the Colts are more than likely going to wind up starting Anthony Richardson, a quarterback, this next season. That means, like for me, I'm not afraid to abandon a plan. If I'm Chris Ballard, I'm sitting around, I'm looking around, and look, like we aren't dumb. Everyone knows that none of the guys left, except for maybe Russell Wilson, would be legitimate competition for Anthony Richardson. If I'm Chris Ballard, I'm dumping this plan, and I'm doing everything I can to secure all of the other positions. Okay, Will Fries is gone. The Colts do not have a right guard right now, which is important if you want to be able to run the football well. And if you can run the football well, it helps support a young quarterback that's still learning, okay? So the Colts still need to secure depth along the offensive line. A little more depth at wide receiver wouldn't be a bad thing. Ashton Dulin re-signed with the Colts yesterday on a 2-year, $8 million deal. Ashton Dulin, good special teams player. But if he's taking snaps for you at wide receiver, that's an issue. So they need a little more depth at wide receiver. They need a right guard. They need depth behind the offensive linemen that they have. They need, a second running back to take some of the load off of Jonathan Taylor, because, running back it's a physical position. Jonathan Taylor's likely going to miss a couple games this next year just because of how that position is played. And in the games that he missed last year, that combination of Trey Sermon and Tyler Goodson wasn't the best. Also, Trey Sermon, free agent. He's not coming back. If you don't have a player that can push Anthony Richardson, that can really compete with him, and because, the idea is that, you bring in competition and then Anthony Richardson plays better because he's competing every day and he's doing all those things. That option does not appear to be available for the Colts. It doesn't. I'm sorry. Right? Fields is off the board. Darnold off the board. Okay, Rodgers probably going to wind up in Pittsburgh. So if you don't have a player that can legitimately push Anthony Richardson, then make sure he has what he needs around him to not fail. Make sure he has what he needs around him where you can sit back and legitimately evaluate the guy. Okay? Like there can't be any excuses for Anthony Richardson this season. Can't happen. It is the last thing that the Colts need. Okay? The absolute last thing. Okay? So a legitimate quarterback competition probably isn't going to happen this year. Unless, maybe they draft Quinn Ewers or Jackson Dart. I guess, you could potentially talk me into thinking that this is competition, but, I'm just not convinced that Quinn Ewers or Jackson Dart or, who are going to be drafted in like the third round. I'm just not convinced that those guys would be viewed as legitimate competition within that building, considering the fact that Anthony Richardson is the number 4 overall pick. Okay. And for me, the point of the quarterback competition in camp this year was supposed to be designed to figure out whether or not Anthony Richardson was going to be the guy. Okay. And preferably you would like to know that before the season starts versus, during the season or after the season. Okay. But you can still learn it this year. You're just gonna have to learn it during the season. Okay. And the best way to figure out whether or not he can be your quarterback of the future is to make sure that the roster around him is good enough to find out. And to Chris Ballard's credit, that's right, we're being nice to Chris today. The defense is on track to be good enough this year. Like they are. The secondary is better. Linebacker still needs to be addressed a little bit. They still need one more edge rusher to replace the depth that they lost with Dio Adangbo leaving. The fact that he's getting $16 million a year in, Chicago is crazy. Crazy isn't the right word. But it's just eye opening to the fact that there aren't a ton of great edge rushers available. So looking ahead to what the Colts are going to do this year in the draft, I think we see Tyler Booker, offensive guard from Alabama, since they weren't able to bring Will Fries back. Maybe there's an edge rusher on the board that the Colts really like, and they feel like, they can get a good offensive lineman later in the draft. Chris Ballard was quoted as saying that he really likes the middle depth of the depth of the middle rounds of the NFL draft. So, we'll have to wait and see. I am very intrigued to kind of see where things kind of progress from here. Who do they bring in to compete with Anthony Richardson? What other positions do they address in free agency? As it all happens, we're going to have it for you right here on Indy's Sports Ticket. As news breaks, the Houston Texans just traded for C.J. Gardner-Johnson from the Eagles, gave up a player named Kenyon Green, who I have never, ever heard of. So Houston, they just got better as well. The Colts need to keep adding. They need to, restructure some contracts to free up a little bit more cap space. Let's bring in more good players. Okay. Once again, good job, Chris Ballard. Charvarius Ward is a legitimately good player. He's not good enough. He's just good. Same thing with Cam Bynum. All right. So let's continue to upgrade. Let's continue to find players that make this Colts team better, because Anthony Richardson is going to be the starting quarterback this year. The guys that could have legitimately competed with him are off the board. Daniel Jones is not real competition if he decides to come here to Indianapolis. He's not. I'm sorry. Anthony Richardson's going to be the starter. The Colts need to make sure that the surrounding roster is good enough for him to succeed. Kevin Potts is going to join me at 11 o'clock, and we're going to talk about not just the Colts free agency, but just kind of everything in general as more and more of these, signings continue to come to light. So Kevin Potts, he'll join me coming up here in about 25 minutes. When we come back, though, here in about 4 minutes or so, Pacers, they've lost 3 in a row. They have a big game tonight. We're going to touch on that. And I got some Caitlin Clark stuff for you as well, because I know you're just ready for the fever. I know you are, and you're ready for all the political stuff that comes with that. So my thoughts on the Pacers and a quick little thing on Caitlin Clark when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes? Maybe. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether it's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket, if you want to watch over there. Hop in the chat. You can say insane things like, what's his name? RD said, talking about trading AR. Said they should trade him. They'd have no quarterback on their roster if they did that. But yeah, go ahead. Let's throw Jonathan Taylor back there. Let's let him spin the football just a little bit. Anyway, so if you watch on YouTube, you can be part of the YouTube chat. You can also watch on Twitter, __ Jonathan Smith. That is my personal account. You can follow me there. You can watch the show there. Also, make sure you follow at Ticket 1430 for all the updates on my show and the Dan Dockett show, which will be live today from noon to 3. And yeah, it'll be good. So coming up here in about 20 minutes, Kevin Potts, he's going to join the show, and we're going to talk a little bit of NFL free agency. Before we do that, though, while the Colts full swing off-season free agency, things are happening. The Pacers are also playing, though, and they're playing pretty bad right now. They've lost 3 in a row. Tyrese Halliburton hasn't played in any of the 3 games. He did something to his hip, so he missed both games on the road in Atlanta, and then he missed the game last night on the road in Chicago. Pacers dropped all 3 of them in those 2 losses against Atlanta. The issue was defense, right? Pacers put up more than enough points to win those games, but when you give up over 120 points in the NBA, you're probably going to lose. No way around it. And then last night, it's just ugly. It's just bad. Bad offense, man. Pacers shot 4 of 18 from 3 in the first half last night. For my math majors out there, that's 22%. So they go into halftime 67-48. I'm just kind of like, you know what? They're not going to keep shooting that bad, right? You know, like they'll make some threes. They'll make it like a 6-point game at some point, and then, you know, it'll be on from there, and we'll see what it looks like. That did not happen, though. They just kept shooting terribly. It was just a bad shooting game. And I thought some of the looks looked good. At other times, though, it looked like they were just ready to be back home, and it looked like they were ready for tonight's game against Milwaukee. They finished the game shooting 10 of 40 from 3. They were 40 of 101 from the floor overall. Once again, just a bad offensive game. Guys couldn't make shots. And once that became obvious, like the Pacers just didn't look good like in that second half. They looked lethargic. It led to sloppy play. They didn't turn the ball over a ton, but like none of their passes were really on targets. Like the offense looked rushed, but I don't think it was. It just appeared that way because players didn't look ready for the ball. It was just ugly. It's just an ugly thing to watch, and that's why they got crushed by the Bulls. It's why Rick Carlisle played Johnny Furphy 18 minutes last night. Okay, because the guys that you would expect to show up and lead the way and play hard and rebound and defend and do all those things didn't. The guys that you kind of expect to make shots didn't. And so Rick Carlisle, rightfully so, was like, you know what? Fine then. Johnny Furphy, get in there. Jarris Walker, you're running the offense. Let's go. Okay, they looked bad against a Bulls team that's not very good. They lost by 18. They barely scored 100 points. Once again, against the Bulls team, that's not very good. And they better be ready to go tonight because they weren't last night. If they aren't ready to go tonight, they'll get beat by 30. They're playing the Bucks. And I do believe that the Pacers will be much better prepared for tonight's game for 2 reasons. One, Tyrese Halliburton should play tonight. Like I said, he's missed the last 3. Pacers have lost all 3. Okay. I bet he could have played last night. There's clips of him warming up, hitting shots, doing all that. But this game tonight is just more important than their game last night. So I bet that they just held him out to make sure he was good to go for tonight's game against the Bucks. Okay. You know, once again, he's missed the last 3 games with a hip injury. Pacers have lost all 3. Last night, they couldn't score. Really, of the 3 games, last night was really the only night where it felt like the Pacers missed him. And the 2 games that they lost to the Hawks, they couldn't defend. It was just bad. No other way to really put it. So hopefully the effort is a little bit better tonight because this game against the Milwaukee Bucks is big. They're a full game back of the Bucks, and they're tied with the Detroit Pistons for the 5th seed. The question for the Pacers isn't whether or not they're going to be a top 6 seed. The question is just whether or not they'll be the 4, 5, or 6 seed. Obviously, you want the 4, you have home court advantage, and all those things. Okay? So, tonight's game against the Bucks, it's big. Okay, coming up on Saturday, they play the Bucks. Game's huge as well, right? In terms of, positioning for earning that 4 seed. Okay, like they have an opportunity to pick up a full game tonight. If they can go beat Philly and then turn around and beat Milwaukee on Friday and Saturday, then they'll have picked up 2 whole games. It'll be great. Okay. In terms of the Pistons and kind of where they're at, the Pacers do have the head-to-head against them. They won that season series this year 3-1. Currently in the season series against the Bucks, they're down 0-2. So they need to win tonight at home. It's a big one, and they need to beat them on Saturday as well. I think we'll see the Pacers play well. Halliburton's back. They're trying to snap this ugly 3-game losing streak. It's a game with big playoff implications. It's on national television. Every professional athlete in every sport plays harder when the game's on national TV. It's just a fact. I think we'll see it from both sides tonight, and I can't wait. The game should be great. I have no idea what the line is for that game, but I'm actually kind of intrigued. So I'm going to look it up real quick. And while that's loading, I want to talk about Caitlin Clark because Angel Reese just doesn't know how to be quiet. Okay, all these athletes have podcasts, and I'm just like why? Why do you have a podcast? You haven't, Angel Reese hasn't done anything. Like, who wants to listen to her talk? Not me. That's the answer. Bucks are 2-point favorites tonight in Gainbridge Fieldhouse. So Caitlin Clark shows up in the WNBA, and all of a sudden, everyone thinks that they now deserve more. She shows up. She brings eyeballs. She brings private flights. And now everyone in the WNBA is like, we deserve more money. You don't. Your league isn't earning enough money for that. You're operating at a deficit every single year. You have not had a single year where you have profited a single penny. Just because the biggest star in your sport is the biggest star in sports doesn't mean that everyone else deserves a raise. What has happened to the WNBA is exactly what should be happening. Their salaries shouldn't change. And the best players, the most profitable players, the players with the most name recognition should continue to sign these big endorsement deals. Angel Reese, you're making plenty of money with Reese's and with McDonald's. And I'm sure she's got some shoe deal lined up somewhere. I'm sure people pay to, advertise on her podcast and all of those things. You're making plenty of money, I promise. Caitlin Clark, she's reeling it in. Okay, State Farm, I bet pays her pretty well. Her Nike deal, pretty nice. Okay, she's doing fine as well. Same thing with Asia Wilson. She's in that CarMax commercial, and she's Nike, or she's got to deal with Nike. Same thing with Sabrina Ionescu. She's in those CarMax commercials. She has this endorsement deal with Nike. Her shoes, by the way, look pretty sick, but that's neither here nor there. Why should the salaries of the worst players in the league be increased because of them? That doesn't make sense to me. Okay, like the top of the league, the top of the WNBA is good. It's watchable. But the bottom of it is not. And that is what makes the league so tough to watch. Like the 8th best player on these WNBA teams just aren't very good. And because of that, that's why the league isn't, it's part of why the league isn't profiting. It's just because the league as a whole it's just not very good. Asia Wilson, Caitlin Clark, Sabrina Ionescu, they all deserve all the extra money that they're getting. But when you're cutting a new deal, it's not just for them. It's for everybody. Not just the best players in the league are getting a raise. The whole league is. And the whole league doesn't deserve one because the product just isn't very good. It's just not. Especially when you compare it to the other basketball option that we have, the real NBA. The NBA, on the other hand, like their worst players do deserve a large chunk of change because they're really good at basketball. Just take the Dallas Mavericks, who with the G League roster, essentially, that's a bit dramatic. With multiple G League players on their NBA team, they played the Suns on Sunday. You know, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, Bol, you know, all those guys. Okay. The Mavericks lost by 9 in that game with no Luka, no Kyrie, no center, like no Daniel Gafford, no Derek Lively, no Anthony Davis, and they were able to walk out on the floor against another team at full strength and put together a very entertaining basketball game. The Hawks, without Jalen Johnson, you know, probably their second or third best player. The Pacers, without Tyrese Halliburton, put a great product out on the court. And the WNBA, they just don't have the depth to consistently produce a must-watch product every single night. And until they do, they're going to continue to lose money, and they sure as heck do not deserve any sort of raise. Like if Caitlin Clark wasn't there, no one would care because the depth of the league isn't there the same way that it is for the NFL, Major League Baseball, and the NBA. Okay, if the WNBA wants them to pay, if they want people to pay attention, then you got to find a way to raise the floor of your league because the top of it is good, but the bottom of it is not. No other way around it. Now, moving back to the Indianapolis Colts, as you know, free agency continues to churn on. Once again, Chris Ballard has done a very good job of bringing in guys to address the issues in the secondary on this Indianapolis Colts team. Houston Texans doing the same thing, making a trade for C.J. Gardner-Johnson of the Philadelphia Eagles. Like, that's a good player. He makes them better. He does. By the way, this Eagles defense, it's been gutted. Josh Sweat, he went to Arizona. Milton Williams, he's going to New England. Isaiah Rodgers is in Minnesota. Darius Slay, he got cut. James Bradbury, he got cut. C.J. Gardner-Johnson traded to Houston. That's what, 7 guys? 6 guys? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 6 guys from their defense last year that are now like they're gone. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Eagles retool. You know that they will because Howie Roseman does an incredible job. And then you have Houston staying in this division. They don't really have an offensive line. And this is something that I think is going to be really important for us to keep our eye on because, let's just be honest, the Houston Texans, they are the standard in the AFC South. They have the best quarterback. Okay, they have a good coach. They've won the division 2 years in a row. And, you know, the offensive line for Houston this last year, it wasn't very good. And the Texans traded their left tackle, Laramie Tunsil, to the Washington Commanders. They traded Kenyon Green, another offensive lineman, that they spent a first-round pick on, traded him to Philadelphia, and then they just straight up cut Shaq Mason. That is 3 offensive linemen for the Houston Texans that like played a significant amount of time for them. And so I'm very intrigued to see how they go about retooling. That is just, you know, another team in this Colts division that really needs to be kept an eye on because when you look at winning this division, I don't think that the Colts are really worried about the Titans who have, you know, improved their offensive line a little bit more. I don't think we're really worried about Jacksonville. They haven't really done much of anything here in free agency. Obviously, though, like if Trevor Lawrence plays well, then you have to worry about him. So we'll see. Just like the movement around the AFC South has just been interesting. Like I don't feel like the Titans have really gotten that much better. Are they better? Sure, but they're not like all of a sudden great. The Houston Texans, their offensive line, like they've gotten worse, I would argue, so far throughout free agency. So just I'm very intrigued to see how all of this kind of continues to evolve as we continue to move forward. With that being said, Kevin Potts of the Kevin Potts NFL and NFL Draft Breakdown Substack, he's set to join the show coming up here at 11 o'clock. So here in about 5 minutes or so, we're going to get his thoughts on everything that the Colts did yesterday. We're going to get his thoughts on Geno Smith going to the Raiders, Sam Darnold to the Seahawks, just kind of this quarterback shuffle that we've seen. Get his thoughts on the Bears. They have a whole new offensive line. It's kind of crazy. Myles Garrett, Max Crosby both signed some monster deals. We're going to get his thoughts on all of those things, and we're, of course, going to have to talk a little bit about the NFL draft. Daniel Jones is going to sign with the Indianapolis Colts. That just broke. Gosh dang it. Daniel freaking Jones. Can't stand it. All right. We'll get Kevin Potts' thoughts and my thoughts on Daniel Jones on the other side of this break. I'll be right back here in about 4.5 minutes with thoughts on Daniel Jones being the Colts' new starting quarterback. Or not starting quarterback. New quarterback to compete with Anthony Richardson.
Progressive knows if you have to choose.
do this. It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether it's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. If you want to head over there and subscribe, hop to the chat, tell me your thoughts on Daniel Jones being the Colts' new potential starting quarterback. I guess that's supposed to be competition for Anthony Richardson. I don't really know. Joined by Kevin Potts, writer of the Kevin Potts NFL and NFL Draft Breakdowns Substack. Kevin, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm good. Past 48 hours, definitely been a wind, and definitely that reminder that the NFL is king, even in their offseason.
They are. Things are happening. All right. Daniel Jones, what are your thoughts on him coming to the Colts?
Well, I think there's probably two ways to look at it. One of it is Chris Ballard's doing what he's saying. He did say at his press conferences he was going to bring in a veteran quarterback. I know Daniel Jones has been the butt of a lot of jokes for being overdrafted and overpaid, but he's still probably one of the better veteran quarterbacks on the market. He's obviously the same athlete as Richardson. There's some skill overlap when you are creating a game plan. That's about all the positives I do have. You're paying $14 million for a backup quarterback is what you'd probably hope to come in and be like a veteran leader for Richardson. That's a lot of money. If he does start, well, now Richardson's down the drain and you're starting Daniel Jones. It's kind of a lot of money for a player I don't really like and I don't really want starting for my team. I would have rather gotten the Jacoby Brissett for half that money because you still, it's a one-year deal, are probably going to have to draft a quarterback at some point. And it's just a lot of investment into a quarterback room with pretty limited upside outside of Richardson just figuring it out.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. $14 million for a backup quarterback is just, it's not great, but at the same time, like you said, Chris Ballard talked about how, like, he was going to be more active and he was going to bring in like legitimate competition for Anthony Richardson. I'm not convinced that this is like legitimate competition. Like, I feel like that, if they were running 4 laps and whoever completes the 4 laps first is the starting quarterback, I feel like Anthony Richardson is going to have like a lap and a half head start, right?
Yeah, I think this is probably as close as you can bring to saying it's competition without actually having to take away the job from Richardson. Because if you brought in a guy like Fields or maybe a Rodgers or Russell Wilson that's been a veteran and done a bunch of things in the career, then it's a little bit more interesting. I think Jones is probably the highest level backup you could bring in where you can say it's competition because the name's well known, but you don't actually have to bench Richardson at the end of camp.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. This just, it doesn't feel like a real competition, which is fine, right? Because like if you're the Colts, and I've been pretty adamant about this, joined by Kevin Potts, writer of the Kevin Potts NFL and NFL Draft Breakdown Substack. I think that if you're in the AFC, given just the slew of quarterbacks that are going to be there for the next 8 years, Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Lamar, obviously, I'm a big proponent of you have to draft a quarterback with an incredibly high ceiling. Anthony Richardson has that. I want him to be the guy this year and hopefully the guy for the next, 10 years. And I think Daniel Jones kind of gives them the space to do that. So it's going to be good. Yeah. So once again, joined by Kevin Potts, talking a little free agency. What are your thoughts on the other signings from the Colts?
I love them. Before the Jones signing, I thought they were having one of the better starts to free agency. Like you said, Chris Ballard actually putting his money where his mouth is for once, going out and giving big money to Charvarius Ward and Cam Bynum. I'm a little less familiar with Bynum, but I do think he's a quality safety. Notice of Lou Anarumo coming in. Safeties are a big part of his defense. He really likes smart players on the back end. I trust his evaluations. Ward, I have a lot of familiarity with coming from San Francisco as a Niners fan. He had a little bit of a step back last year for non-football reasons. He had some personal life tragedies that really affected him, but he has been one of the best corners over the past 4 to 5 years. He's a true number one. I do expect a bounce back for him in a fresh new situation. And for a Colts team that really needed help in that secondary, I think getting both of those two guys to come in is going to be a really big deal, especially with this new defensive system they got going.
I was going to ask, how do they fit into what Lou Anarumo likes to do on defense?
I think they're both extremely smart players, and I think that is a huge deal. Ward is primarily more of a zone corner, but I don't think he's bad in man coverage. But both of these guys are veterans. They have played in a variety of systems. Obviously, Bynum's coming from a weird one in Minnesota, but I think they are players that Anarumo can trust, and they can do a variety of things. And you're paying a premium because it's free agency, but bringing in veterans that know what they're doing, and you don't have to worry about teaching them a defense is probably why they're bringing in these guys for these price tags.
That makes sense. So here's kind of my take on just everything that's happened for the Colts. I'm with you. I really like these signings. They're good players. It feels like a lot of the guys on the Colts roster in these previous years have been like good enough. If that makes sense, where it's like, yeah, we'll give you like a 1-year deal and then like we'll look to upgrade, and then it just never happened until this year. But the biggest thing that I think's happened for the Colts is Will Fries wasn't brought back. He's going to Minnesota. And for me, that means that the Colts are probably going to take Tyler Booker out of Alabama at offensive guard with the 14th pick. How likely is that, given everything that's kind of happened for the Colts so far this, free agency cycle?
I definitely think offensive line is obviously way bigger a need. Just you need to fix that right guard spot. I'm not sure it would be Tyler Booker. I do really like Booker, but he didn't really test very well at the combine. He is a pure gap scheme guard that's mostly played left guard. I think if a team in the first round is going to take him, it's probably going to be more of a team like the Chargers that run so much gap scheme. The Colts are a little bit more 50-50 between gap and zone blocking. I think Gray Zabel might be an option for them, or I think they might look at one of the tackles like a Kelvin Banks, who was a left tackle in college. A lot of people think he might be a guard. So I do think offensive line is definitely fully on the table with 14. I don't know if Booker is going to be the exact fit and type of player they would like, just because there's some athletic concerns there.
Okay, that makes sense. So who would kind of fit the mold of what Chris Ballard usually takes in terms of offensive linemen?
I think both. I mentioned Kelvin Banks Jr., who's a tackle, might be a guard, and Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State. They're both of those guys that I think will be there at 14 because they're not supposed to be top 10, top 15 picks. So maybe it's a little on the early range for them, but they have both played a variety of blocking schemes. They're both good athletes, and they have positional versatility. And I think that is the type of player when you're kind of shuffling along this offensive line. Obviously, right guard's the big hole, but as you're moving forward, figuring out who your best five are, having a guy that can play 4 to 5 spots is really advantageous. I think Banks and Zabel bring the versatility scheme-wise and alignment-wise.
Okay, that makes sense. Joined by Kevin Potts, writer of the Kevin Potts NFL and NFL Draft Breakdowns Substack. What have been your thoughts on just all of the movement with quarterbacks? Sam Darnold to Seattle, obviously, Jones to the Colts, Geno Smith traded from Seattle to Las Vegas. What have kind of been your thoughts on how everyone's kind of been shuffled around?
Yeah, I think the big one obviously comes down to what Seattle did at their quarterback. We talked about it when we did the Jalen Hurts segment a couple of weeks ago. I'm a big fan of Geno Smith. I didn't agree with the trade. I know he wanted more money than what Darnold did, but I think they probably could have gotten a similar 3-year deal, even if it's a little bit more expensive. They probably save like $10 million a year, which in this free agency market is exactly 1 Tutu Atwell. So it's just really not a ton of money. But it seems like Seattle is still trying to compete with Darnold. The deal in a vacuum for Sam Darnold I actually think is really good. It's not a ton of guaranteed money. You're only locked in for basically 2 years. So I'm sure that third year is all funny money. Outside of those two quarterbacks, there's just not really a lot of difference makers on the market. Justin Fields for the Jets is fine. We'll see what he can do. I don't think they're trying to win this year anyways. And then we'll see what team between the Giants and the Steelers end up with Rodgers and Wilson. And then both of those destinations don't really move me. It's a pretty bad free agency and draft class for quarterbacks, which makes it kind of an underwhelming position to monitor outside of Darnold going to Seattle.
With how all of this quarterback stuff is shaken out, do you think the Giants take Shedeur Sanders with the third pick?
I think they're going to try to trade up to number 1 is kind of what it feels like the rumors have been coming out of the combine. Now, it's rumor season. It's a ton of stuff to sort through, but I think that they have the most pressure to go get a quarterback of some sort, even if they sign a veteran here. I think they're going to make a pretty big push to go get to one and get Ward. If Tennessee likes Ward and they stick there at 1, I do think they'd probably take Sanders at 3 because this coaching staff and this front office has to have something at that position going forward because they have their jobs on the line, and I don't think they can afford to just roll out Russell Wilson and hope for the best.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Russell Wilson in New York. Could you imagine Russell Wilson playing for Brian Daboll? I don't think that would go well.
It'd be hilarious. I mean, their quarterbacks left are Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson that are quote-unquote starter quality, and they're both hilarious no matter where they go, whether it's with Mike Tomlin, whether it's Brian Daboll, just because they're over-the-hill veterans that have strong opinions with coaches that have strong opinions. So it's funny for us regardless, but for fans of those teams, that seems like a nightmare to me.
Yeah, joined by Kevin Potts, writer of the Kevin Potts NFL and NFL Draft Breakdown Substack, just talking about everything that's happened in free agency. How have the Bears been able to just build a brand new offensive line in a matter of, like, they did it in like 24 hours. Like, free agency started and the Bears had like 5 new offensive linemen. How have they been able to do this so quickly?
Well, part of it always comes down to the rookie wage scale. When you have a rookie quarterback, you have the freedom to go be more aggressive and hand out these big contracts. Minnesota is doing it as well with J.J. McCarthy, obviously to a smaller degree. And I also think that the Bears are okay knowing that some of these deals are probably not going to be quote-unquote good deals. They paid a lot for a 33-year-old guard in Joe Thuney. They paid a lot for a solid center, but not an elite center in Dahlman. They're investing heavily into this offensive line to make sure that it works for Caleb Williams. I think if we look back in 5 years, if we inspect each of these individual deals for the Bears, they probably aren't the best value and anything you're going to write home about. But I do think what they're going to do is give Caleb Williams the infrastructure to grow as a quarterback into that franchise player they believe. And at the end of the day, that makes it worth it, even if the deals might be overpays.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm going to ask a question. I feel like it's dumb, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Did the Browns overpay for Myles Garrett?
I don't think they overpaid for Myles Garrett because it's Myles Garrett, but they should have traded him. Because I think paying Garrett $40 million is totally fine because I think he's the best edge rusher in football, and he's been that for some time. But looking at what the Browns are as a team, having Myles Garrett doesn't really help them because they're so far away from being a team. His contract they just signed him to is going to be over by the time they're ready to compete anyways. I think they just need to take their medicine and just get rid of all their money and do the crazy big rebuild. The individual deal, I'll never say no to signing Myles Garrett because he's that good, and I do think there is something to say about selling tickets, keeping your fans in the building. It's really hard to do when you move off from Garrett. But I think for long-term football health, they probably should have looked to move him instead of re-signing him.
You know, one of the interesting things I think about this free agency cycle is Dio Adangbo, who has like 11 sacks in the last 2 seasons, is getting paid $16 million a year for the next 3 years to go be an edge rusher for the Bears. The Colts now kind of need a little more depth at that edge rusher spot. Is there another guy that's still available in free agency that the Colts could bring in simply just for depth at the edge rusher position?
Yeah, I think if you're looking for depth of edge rush position, it's going to be a lot of these older guys that used to be good. Von Miller, Zadarius Smith, Joey Bosa, who are going to need to be rotational rushers at this point just because they're older and they're not going to be on the field as much. That also drags down their price. If you're looking to spend more and actually get like a legit starter, Azeez Ojulari had a really nice year for the Giants, and Dante Fowler Jr. had a really nice year for the Commanders. Both of them are not off the market yet. I would imagine they are the two younger edges holding out for those 3-4 year deals. So if you're looking for more of a long-term replacement, I think you're going to have to overpay both those players, but those would be the guys to look for. If you're bargain bin hunting, I think it's those veterans I mentioned, just more rotation pieces, and then supplement that with another draft pick.
The Eagles have lost 7 players on their defense. How do you think Howie Roseman is going to go about rebuilding and kind of retooling that defense?
Well, he's probably just going to draft whatever Georgia player drops in the first round, and it's going to work out really well.
Yeah.
I have a lot of faith in them because they've shown, one, the ability, obviously, to draft, like I mentioned. They have done a really good job at bargain bin hunting. They did it last year. It's the reason Barkley and Bond came back. And they're usually pretty good at picking up guys in trades that are reclamation projects. They just might have done it with Kenyon Green. They've also been drafting pretty well for the past couple of years, and they have backup options. We'll see if they work. We'll see if Sidney Brown can step in at safety for Gardner Johnson. We're going to see if Eli Ricks or Keely Ringo can step in at corner for Darius Slay. But they have options on day 2 and day 3 that they've drafted that are going to get first crack at it. And then I just have faith in Roseman. It doesn't work to find options on the veteran market or draft a replacement if they need it.
Joined by Kevin Potts of the Kevin Potts NFL and NFL Draft Breakdown Substack. Last question for you, and I will let you go. What move in free agency has impacted your next mock draft the most?
I think it's not even a free agency one. It's Geno Smith to the Raiders, because that was a pretty popular spot. If one of the quarterbacks slid, what happens there at 6? And now that they have Geno, well, they obviously still could take a quarterback. I think it is far less likely that they do that. And trying to work on my post-free agency mock draft, I'm having a lot of trouble slotting what the Raiders are going to do at that spot. Do they take a quarterback? Do they go Ashton Genty? They still have a lot of holes on the defense, but none of these defenders really stand out at that spot if Mason Graham's gone. So what is their option there? And I think it's a really big pivot point for the trickle down for the teams, 10 teams after them, what they do, because I don't think anyone really expected them to have such a good answer at quarterback heading into the draft. So that really kind of throws off everything. And then a couple guys on the back end, Houston trading away basically all their offensive linemen, including their former All-Pro tackle, Laramie Tunsil, which I get from on paper why you do that money-wise and getting the picks, but it has now forced them, they have to take offensive line in the 20s and are probably a pretty big candidate to trade up from that spot because they have to get a starter at 3 different spots now at this point. So that's going to really shake up drafts because I don't know where they're going to pick that lineman and what lineman they're going to pick.
All right, so here's my idea. Raiders trade back to 14 with the Colts. They take, what's his name? Big edge rusher out of Georgia.
Micah Williams?
Maybe. Yes. Yeah. Maybe they take him. Maybe they take Malachi Starks. I'm not fully informed on what the Raiders need on defense, but it seems just from the mock drafts that I've read, feels like more defensive players are going to start coming off the board around the middle of the first round. Colts trade up to 6 where they can take, an offensive lineman or the guy that everyone here in Indianapolis wants, Tyler Warren. What do you think of that?
I like it because I do think if the Colts want an offensive lineman or they want a tight end, you have to get up ahead of probably 10, because I think once you get to 10, when like the Niners, the Cowboys, and the Dolphins all pop up, it's going to be really hard to get guys like Warren or one of those top offensive linemen. And like you said, the defenders go off in the teens because I have about 15 interior defensive linemen and edge rushers with basically the same grade. So if you want a pass rusher, I think stay at 14. They'll probably be one you want. But if you want to go get something on offense, I do think you'd probably have to move up in the top 10 to get a true difference maker for year one.
Cool. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Last thing for real, Kevin, it's just a thing at this point. I say last question and then I ask like 4 more. Who's the next? Which free agent are you most intrigued to see sign next?
I'm curious to see where Tevin Jenkins goes because I believe he's probably the last big guard on the market, and his guard market's been absolutely ridiculous. My guess is it's Seattle because they just cleared $60 million in cap space and have zero interior offensive linemen and have made zero additions. But with all these guards getting $18 to $20 million, I think he's probably the last big one. And I'm very curious to see if he lands in Seattle. And if he doesn't land there, what are they going to do with all the offensive linemen gone at this point?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. The offensive guard market has been crazy. Like Will Fries for $88 million over 5 years felt like a lot. Is that like, is that a lot for a guy who's coming off, what was a good year before he got hurt?
Yeah, it's a ridiculous amount. It started last year when Carolina kind of blew up the market when they overpaid for both their guards, kind of similar to what the Bears are doing just to fix everything in front of Bryce Young. But it's continued, and it's only been made worse by extremely weak free agency class and a massive spike in cap. So all these teams have money to spend, not just the ones that cleared it, but just all the teams. You mentioned, obviously, Fries. Aaron Banks coming from the 49ers getting almost $80 million when he is probably at best an average guard. It's a lot. And it's one of those things where when teams let him go like the Colts and the Niners, I don't think it's hard to get mad at the front office because you're overpaying for a player that probably isn't going to live up to that contract. And it's going to be interesting to see how it affects the draft too. Our team's going to start drafting these guards and centers a lot higher because what used to be a pretty easy position to fill in free agency on days 2 and 3 is now a premium position that is gone 30 minutes into the legal tampering period. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all unfolds in the future.
Kevin Potts of the NFL and NFL Draft Breakdown Substack. Last thing for real. Kyle Juszczyk. He got cut by the Niners. You seem like a guy that really likes watching Kyle Juszczyk play football. Where does he end up?
Oh, he's interesting. There's not a lot of teams that use fullbacks anymore. And while he's still a good player, he's definitely taken a bit of a step back. I think he might stay in division and go to Seattle. They have Kubiak come in as their offensive coordinator. He did a bunch of stuff in 21 personnel last year using that fullback. I don't think he's super pumped about getting cut. They made him take a pay cut last year. They probably asked him again this year. He probably refused, and the Niners let him go. So it wouldn't shock me if he wants to get a little bit of revenge, stay in division. And I think Seattle is the type of team that would be a really good fit in their new offensive system. Okay.
Sounds good. Kevin, thanks for your time, man. As always, you were great.
Yeah, man. It's always a pleasure.
See ya. That is Kevin Potts. You can check him out on Twitter at KevinPotts06. Always a blast talking, football with him. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, more stuff on Daniel Jones signing with the Colts and everything else that the Colts did yesterday. It's all coming your way here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes, stories, and entertainment. It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket. 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you've had a nice week. Colts news continues to roll on in. They just added Daniel Jones to the quarterback room 1 year. A lot of different reports on the money. I think it maxes out at like $17 million, but like 13.5 of it is guaranteed. And, that's a little much for Daniel Jones. But at the same time, when you're trying to get him to choose between coming to Indianapolis versus staying in Minnesota, you just got to cough up a little extra money in order to make it happen. And, like I said earlier in the show, if I was Chris Ballard, I just would have abandoned this whole thing as soon as Justin Fields ended up in New York and been like, you know what? We're just going to make sure the rest of our roster is really good around Anthony. Now, glass half full side of this is we're going to figure out whether or not Anthony Richardson can be a starting quarterback in the NFL or not. You say, Jonathan, what do you mean? If he beats out Daniel Jones, that proves nothing. I would disagree. If he can't beat out Daniel Jones, then he has no business being a starting quarterback in the NFL. Okay? Like that is just the reality of it. Okay? Someone chiming in in the YouTube chat, Ridger, if you want to watch on YouTube and be part of the chat, Indy Sports Ticket, if you want to head over there, subscribe and watch the live stream. Ridger chiming in saying, we now possibly have the two worst quarterbacks in the league. Not true. We don't have Aiden O'Connell on our roster, so we're good. Just kidding. Just jabbing at Purdue fans because for some reason they love Aiden O'Connell. Anyway, so that's the thing with Daniel Jones, right? Like he's not Aaron Rodgers. He's not Russell Wilson or any of those guys. Honestly, when you compare him to a lot of the other quarterbacks that the Colts could have gone and gotten, he's not as good. But he is cheaper. Okay, I'm sure they didn't want to fork out, the extra $6 million a year that it would have cost to bring Justin Fields to Indianapolis. Okay, Daniel Jones, it's only a 1 year deal, not a big deal. Okay, like he'll be gone after this season. All right, so I do think that while this isn't the perfect move for the Colts, okay, like while we all probably would have preferred to have seen, I don't know, Justin Fields or Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson or someone like that. This isn't worst case scenario because the best thing for the Colts is for Anthony Richardson to be the starter. It is. Like that is the absolute best thing for them. Because as I mentioned with Kevin, when you're in the AFC and you have to run through this gauntlet of Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, you can't have like a high floor quarterback. You need a high ceiling quarterback. And that is what Anthony Richardson is. Okay. The best thing for the Colts in terms of them winning a Super Bowl at some point is for Anthony Richardson to be the starter, to come back a better player, and to develop and to hopefully eventually reach his ceiling. Because if he does, I don't think even the people, even if you don't like Anthony Richardson, everyone can admit that the talent is there. Okay, it is. All right, I'm not going to fret too much about the deal. Is it a little much? Sure. But if you want to bring someone in, like you have to pay them. And, as I've mentioned, I feel like multiple times over the past few days, Adam Schefter, a guy who's pretty reliable, had reported that, Daniel Jones wanted to stay in Minnesota. And if you want to lure someone away from where they want to stay, we've learned money talks. Okay, it does. That's why Myles Garrett stayed in Cleveland. It's why Max Crosby stayed in Las Vegas. The organization's ponied up and they paid him a whole bunch of money. And in order to pry Daniel Jones away, and in order for Chris Ballard to give us what he said he was going to give us, he had to pay a little extra for Daniel Jones. Is it too much money? Yeah, sure, probably. But like I said, I'm not going to freak out. It's a 1 year deal. He'll be gone at the end of the year. It's really not that big of a deal. C. Fitch chiming in on Twitter saying Indiana Jones want a playoff game. He'll be the week one starter. I don't think he will be. Like he would have to thoroughly outplay Anthony Richardson in order to get that deal. Okay, like he would. Like, they are giving Anthony Richardson a head start on this because, once again, Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard want him to be the guy. Like, that's just the reality of it. Their jobs are tied to Anthony Richardson. Okay, like, he has to show up. Because if he's great, Ballard and Steichen have their job secured for a little while longer. But if he's not, then who knows? So I fully expect for Anthony Richardson to be the starting quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts this next season. If he's not, it'll be really shocking. I'll have to eat quite a bit of crow. And it's okay, though. That's part of this. So I expect for Anthony Richardson to be the starter and for Daniel Jones to be the $14 million backup here in Indianapolis. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, we'll get into the Colts and their other moves from yesterday, bringing in Cameron Bynum, bringing in Charvarius Ward, and one of the biggest issues with the Indianapolis Colts, I'm going to tell you about it when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Unadulterated sports talk with unfiltered takes. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, not Instagram, YouTube or Twitter, or that Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you find your apps. You can also check out the show on YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket, if you want to head over there and subscribe. The Indianapolis Colts have officially brought in the quarterback that will compete with the, former 4th overall pick, Anthony Richardson. Daniel Jones is coming in. It was also reported that the Steelers could have a deal in place with Aaron Rodgers as of today. We'll have to wait and see when, the Steelers wind up officially signing him, because that is probably where he's going to be. So the Colts have officially brought in Daniel Jones and are already going at it with people. C. Fitch saying that Daniel Jones is going to be the starter week 1. No, he's not. It's going to be Anthony Richardson. He will be the week 1 starter. Will he be the starter in the final week of the season? Probably not. Because, he'll probably get hurt somewhere along the way. And I'm sure that was part of how they got Daniel Jones to come in. They're like, hey, look, man, if you back up J.J. McCarthy, we know he tore his meniscus last year, but our guy over here, yeah, week 3, cracked rib, guarantee you. And then from there, you're going to play for a month, and then during that month, you'll have an opportunity to outplay him and be the official starter the rest of the way. That to me is way more likely than Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones showing up at camp and Daniel Jones just thoroughly outplaying Anthony Richardson. I find that really hard to believe. And I think the Colts do as well. Like, if they thought that Daniel Jones had a legitimate chance of beating out Anthony Richardson, I don't think that they would have signed him to only a 1-year deal. I think it would have been for multiple years, because if Daniel Jones shows up and he outplays Anthony Richardson and he's your week 1 starter, then that, probably means that he's going to have to be a starter somewhere. And that would be, very concerning about Anthony Richardson. He will be the week 1 starter, though, just because the Colts have invested so much in him. The 4th overall pick. Okay? Like they want Anthony Richardson to be their guy so badly. And there's going to be this very interesting this push and pull this year of Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen, knowing that if they don't win this year, that they could probably be fired. But they also know that if Anthony Richardson doesn't pan out, then they could also be fired for that. So how they try to kind of manipulate those two things and bring them together is going to be very, very intriguing. Okay, so Daniel Jones, not great. It could be worse, I guess. They could have brought in, I don't know, what's his name? Aiden O'Connell, but that would have been terrible. John Buzzard chiming in with a fantastic point. Daniel Jones, starting over Anthony Richardson, has a good of a chance of happening as a coach's kid being removed from shortstop and the leadoff spot. Couldn't agree more. It's not happening. He's their golden child. He's going to have to get hurt or be atrocious during the regular season for him to lose his spot. That is what's going to have to happen. Simple as that. Now, the Colts, while Chris Ballard, Chef Ballard, according to DeForest Buckner, while Chef Ballard's been in the kitchen cooking this offseason, I do have a question. Why did it take so long? Like, why didn't all of these things happen last year? Not the Daniel Jones signing, but the Cam Bynum and the Charvarius Ward signings. Why did it take Drew Lock throwing for 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, and the Giants hanging 45 points up on this defense for Chris Ballard to finally be like, you know what? We might need some help in the secondary. Why did it take so long for this to happen? You hear people say things like it's important to be proactive and not reactive, because if you're reactive, then you're just always a step behind. And the Colts, for these last 5 or 6 years, have been a reactive franchise. They haven't gotten out in front of their problems. Okay? Like with Andrew Luck, they could have drafted a young quarterback to develop behind him. They could have been proactive in that. But they're like, nah, he'll be around. He's not going to retire. He just likes going through rehab all the time. They didn't do that. So they were behind the 8 ball, and it led to them starting 7 different quarterbacks in a 3-year stretch. They didn't draft a quarterback until it was absolutely obvious that they had to take one. Okay, they just kept slapping a Band-Aid on it, and eventually they're like, I don't think we can put any more Band-Aids on this issue. We're going to have to actually draft somebody. They were reactive to their quarterback issues, and it's why they've struggled for the past, 5 years or however long it's been since they made the playoffs. And we're seeing them do the exact same thing with the secondary. These additions are reactive, not proactive. And we're going to see it not only with the secondary this year, but we're going to see it with the tight end position this year as well. Like the Colts had the 26th ranked pass defense last year. And everyone who had eyes and read over the Colts roster and looked at the guys that they had in the secondary, they immediately knew, like, hey, this secondary not going to be very good. Okay? Yet, Chris Ballard and all his wisdom and genius didn't do anything. It took a year of awful play on the back end for him to do anything about this secondary. This is a reactive thing, not proactive. And I know that Gus Bradley is sitting at home, probably really frustrated by this, seeing all these changes because, Charvarius Ward and Cam Bynum are players of their caliber would have made the Colts defense better last year. And I'm sure that Gus Bradley could have put a better product on the field if he hadn't, spent, training camp trying to convert a linebacker to safety and trying to teach Jalen Jones, a 7th-round pick, how to play corner. I'm sure this defense would have been better if the Colts hadn't have had to rely on a waiver wire pickup at corner. Okay, like this is a franchise that just reacts to things that happen to them. And when you do that, you're always a step behind everything. Do you know why the Eagles are so freaking good all the time? Because they're proactive. Okay, like they see the issues coming down the line and they get out in front of them. The Colts, they don't do that. Okay, it took multiple years of a bad secondary for Chris Ballard to do anything. And this year in the draft, they are going to take a tight end. It only took, 5 years of bad to mediocre tight end play for Chris Ballard to finally be like, you know what? We need a new tight end. This whole tight end by committee thing isn't going very well. Okay, so I hate how reactive this franchise is. Like, get out in front of stuff. Like pay attention to your roster and address the needs before they arise. With that being said, Chris Ballard has done a good job so far this offseason. Daniel Jones, it's not perfect. Better than nothing. Cam Bynum, though, this is a safety coming in from Minnesota who's going to make a real impact, who's going to play like a pretty decent amount. All right, and I like this signing for several reasons. The most obvious one is that the Colts needed a safety, and Julian Blackmon wasn't cutting it. So I am glad that the Colts decided not to re-sign their own, and instead they chose to go in a different direction, which is nice. Cam Bynum, only 26. Okay, still young. So that 4-year deal isn't like a major thing. He'll be 30 in his final year of it. That's fine. Okay, he's played in the league for 4 years. And here's probably my favorite thing about him. In 4 years, he's missed 3 games. His rookie year, he played in 14 of the 17 games. And in the last 3 years, he hasn't missed a start. Started in all 17 games, all 3 seasons. Okay, so this dude's durable. He's not going to miss games. Another important thing about him, based on what I know about Lou Anarumo's defense, is that he's versatile. And apparently it's very important for the safety and the kind of defense that Lou Anarumo runs. It's very important for the safety to be versatile. Okay, this guy played cornerback in college. That means this dude can cover, like man-to-man zone. He can do all of it. Okay, like there are some NFL safeties that don't cover very well. They just feel like extra linebackers. Think Jamal Adams when he's playing in Seattle. Down at the line of scrimmage, filling the run well, blitzing well, which is nice, but you need a safety that can cover, and Cam Bynum can do that. Now, he can also come down and fill the run and blitz. You can't play for Brian Flores if you don't have those skills. You don't log 233 tackles in a 2-year span if you can't fill the run. Okay, but he also has the coverage skills on the back end of the defense to keep Nico Collins from running wild like he tends to do whenever the Texans play the Colts. In his past 2 seasons, he has 19 passes defended and 5 interceptions. So Cam Bynum, good player. He can cover. He can fill the run. He fills a position of need for the Colts. He's only 26, so he's going to be around for a little bit. And most importantly, he's better than Julian Blackmon, which isn't saying much, but I'm going to take the upgrades where I can get them, especially at a position that people tell me is so important for Lou Anarumo and this defense. The Colts got a good player. Like that's the biggest thing in all of this. He's not good enough. He's a legitimately good football player, which is nice. Charvarius Ward, this is the other guy that the Colts signed, 3 years, $60 million. Speaking of Lou Anarumo, I know he's happy. He got a safety. He has a legitimate number 1 corner. Now, Charvarius Ward's a little older. He's 28. But he's had a lot of success. He can be the best cornerback on a leading defense in the NFL. When was the last time the Colts had that? Couldn't tell you. He didn't have a great year last year. There's multiple factors for that. Like his daughter died, and so he missed some games because of that. I couldn't imagine how bad I'd be at my job if anything like that happened to me. So I think that plays into part of it. I think the other part of it is 2 years ago, he was amazing. 23 passes defended in that season, 5 interceptions, the best corner on a team that played in the Super Bowl. Okay, like that's who he was. So I'm sure teams didn't want to throw his way as much last year because he had that breakout season. He's a good player. He makes this Colts defense better. Isn't it amazing that when you're willing to pay guys and hand out money in free agency that you can bring in good players? Seriously, it's nice. The Colts added 2 legitimately good football players yesterday. And they added a guy in Daniel Jones who's had a good season, who isn't going to be the starter week 1, but is probably going to have to play some because Anthony Richardson is going to get hurt. Okay? I trust Daniel Jones more than Joe Flacco. If, or I guess when, Anthony Richardson gets hurt at some point this year. Okay? The Colts, though, this is so far a pretty good free agency cycle, right? They brought in a starting caliber safety. They brought in a starting caliber cornerback. And the thing that I like about this is I know that about those guys. This is the issue with only building through the draft. If the Colts had drafted a corner and a safety this year, I'm sure the Colts would have felt good about him. They wouldn't have known for certain, though, because no one ever knows whenever it comes to the NFL draft. Okay, if we knew about every single guy, then draft busts just they would never happen. Okay. So when it comes to the Colts, I'm glad that they're finally investing in proven commodities. Sure, they're a little bit more expensive. You don't have them for quite as long, but they make your football team better. And that's what this Colts team needs. They, added a little bit of depth with these moves as well. Charvarius Ward obviously going to be cornerback number 1. But cornerback 2 becomes less of an issue. It's going to be Jalen Jones or Juju Brents. I'm sure that they're going to have a really good battle in camp to see who earns that job. But then the backups are good. If Samuel Womack is your 4th best corner, that's where he should be. This defensive back room looks like an NFL defensive back room now. It's great. It's nice. The only complaint, it's just part of doing this. My only complaint is the Colts were unable to retain Will Fries. That being said, he's not worth $88 million over 5 years like the Minnesota Vikings are paying him, especially coming off of that injury. Offensive guards are just really expensive right now. They are. No other way around it. So I wish that they'd been able to bring him back. They now have a hole at right guard. Everyone says that Tyler Booker, big kid from Alabama, or offensive guard from Alabama, he's apparently the best guard in this draft class. Wouldn't be surprised if the Colts took him or another offensive guard with that 14th pick, because that is still, or currently is now, a major hole on their roster. Whether it's Daniel Jones taking snaps or Anthony Richardson, you have to have a good offensive line. You have to. No other way around it. So we'll have to kind of sit back and wait and see. Once again, though, the biggest news of today is the Indianapolis Colts signing Daniel Jones. He is the, I don't know, quarterback 1B right now, I guess. Because, they're going to do the whole open competition thing, even though it's not. Once again, John Buzzard said it better than anyone else is going to. Daniel Jones starting over Anthony Richardson has as good of a chance as a coach's kid being removed from the shortstop and leadoff spot, which is kind of offensive to me because my dad was always my coach, and I always played shortstop and I always led off. So thanks, John. Anyway, so yeah, I'm with John on this. Anthony Richardson, he's going to be the starter week 1. The opportunity for Daniel Jones to potentially overtake that position isn't going to happen during training camp. It's going to happen, in those 2 or 3 games that Anthony Richardson misses due to injury. Okay, if he comes in during those games, then and he plays really well, then maybe he takes the job. I don't think that that's going to happen. Andrew Mann chiming in saying Jones is better than AR. I don't know about that. He got benched for Tommy DeVito, who's not very good. And then he was traded to Minnesota, or, he gets released and he goes to Minnesota, and he's the 3rd string quarterback behind Sam Darnold, who's obviously very good at football, Nick Mullins, and then it was Daniel Jones. Okay? Like let's not all of a sudden act like this Daniel Jones dude is insanely good. I don't think he's better than Anthony Richardson. I'll say it pretty confidently. He's not better than Anthony Richardson. Okay? Now, is the difference between the two significant? No. Like, they're actually probably pretty close, but no, Daniel Jones is not better than Anthony Richardson. Get out of here with all that bull crap. That's going to do it here on the Real Jonathan Smith Show. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in. I greatly appreciate it as always. As always, if you watch the show on YouTube, you can chime in, be a little bit more involved in the conversation. The Dan Dockett Show coming up next for you from noon to 3 o'clock. You can listen to a show on the Indy Sports Ticket app. We got Armando coming on at either 12:30 or 1. It'll just kind of depend. We're talking Daniel Jones, the Colts, and everything that they've done. It's going to be really good. The Dan Dockett Show comes your way here in about 5 minutes.